Lockdown Effectiveness Part 2. Did lockdown work? The next batch of countries. Note to censors, we use only government data. If you have a problem with the results, speak to the government. For lockdown to work, it has to change the trajectory of the virus. You can study the path of the cases or deaths or the rate of growth of the cases of deaths, but it is inadequate to say that lockdown worked. The rate of growth is declining. The rate of growth of cases or deaths is always declining in a normal contagion. We won't go through the whole rigmarole again, but just a reminder that for any peaked curve, even our Egyptian curve, the growth rate, f, cases today over cases yesterday, is declining. And that for a normal distribution we further have the convenient feature that the growth rate is declining at a constant rate. So on log scales for a humped curve that is close to normal, we'll see a growth rate line, purple, declining in a straight line over time. That's normal. For lockdown to have an effect, we need abnormal. We need that natural growth decline line to change. Our rationale for that is the following. If we have a paper dart heading for the ground on a straight trajectory and someone sprinkles fairy dust on the dart and claims that has changed the trajectory of the dart, when the dart continues along its original trajectory, should you believe them? If we have a paper dart heading for the ground on a straight trajectory and someone drops a rock on the dart and claims that has changed the trajectory of the dart, and the dart plummets to the ground, now do you believe them? So sure, if you claim the trajectory has changed because something you did, and I can see a dramatic or significant change in trajectory, then I'll believe you. So that's what we're looking for here, a divergence from the normal line to one significantly steeper. You might think flattening the curve means a flatter growth decline line, but we need fewer cases, and that means a greater reduction. And in a slight change from part 1, the first 20 countries, we're going to let you detect lockdown day by spotting that divergence. If you can't spot one, then no worries, chances are neither can I. It'll just give you a chance to form your own opinion based on the chart before I tell you what I see. It should be pretty easy to spot something as significant as the kind of divergence I've highlighted at left, shouldn't it? If it's there. So we've got our list of 90 countries plus cities and subregions which we don't have the data to work with, and we've done 20. I'm hoping to get another 35 out of the way, so we'll be done in this and one more presentation. Here's a review of the first 20 for no result, where we couldn't fairly make a decision, typically because we lacked a before or an after, 18 fail. And let's just revisit France to refresh or introduce the method. Our Chart and Stats Essentials video introduces these concepts if they're not familiar. The dotted blue and dotted red wavy are the actual daily cases and deaths reported. The mauve magenta purple wavy is the actual growth rate. Mauve is early, limited data. Magenta is available to Ferguson up to March 23rd. Purple is after that. It is that growth rate line that we expect to decline during the contagion. If it's anything like normal, it must decline, else you can't draw that curve. Zooming in and annotating the chart with a lockdown start date and a lockdown effective date, when prior cases had washed out of the incubation period, so it was proper, new and in lockdown cases, we're looking at that declining mauve, magenta, purple line. Textbook, one long decline at a constant rate. It had one data glitch, circle top and bottom, which kicked the growth up briefly, then it resumed at exactly the same gradient. Then it got fat, horizontal, failing to decline, excess cases, but no matter, massive lockdown fail. Georgia's up next after France, but it's a pretty demanding one for your first assessment, so let's move on one. Germany's up after that, and like most primary countries, it has a straightforward chart to analyse. So here's Germany, and we're looking top left at that mauve magenta purple growth rate line and its rate of decline through the contagion. I'll put it full screen, then zoom in. So there's your curve. Spot the kind of decline divergence we're looking for. Recall you'll get a possibly visible climb in growth rate at the start of a contagion, descending through, and then climb again to reset to unity. That's not the virus behaving differently or exponentially, it's just the nature of numbers. For the first case, the growth goes from 0 to 1. A factor of 1 over 0 is infinite. I trust no one is selling an infinite virus meme. So not a test of your IQ, simply a chance for you to see if you can spot the characteristic kinked growth decline line that would show the lockdown changed something. Spot it, that should be the lockdown date or effective date. If you don't spot it, chances are neither can I, because there isn't one, but that's rather the point. If you think e.g. the up and down of 14th March, no, that's ending a micro outbreak, visible hump at bottom, and setting up for the new main outbreak. Germany, 23rd March, that date again, to 20th April. My God, again, a country being responsible and reasonable to its citizens. Unlike the UK or New Zealand or Oz, it seems, probably the US also, and locals can maybe inform us. Kind of them to give us such a clear and easy case to start with Georgia on hold for a sec. Growth decline line massively in line with the dashed blue auto fit, a wiggle from a mini outbreak, and a micro blip from a spike missing data or spike mini outbreak. Whether it really was a micro outbreak, spike up, spike down, or whether Germany chose not to report that day, France had a similar feature, the spike of cases back to 0 dips the growth decline line, but it then resumes a perfectly aligned decline. It's ironic that the very masters of the charade, our EU, UK and US leaders, should be the ones with the most data, best data and most perfect fit to normal, so that we can so readily debunk their lockdown. Lockdown fail. And for curiosity, here's that French blip, and I can't help trying something. Rendering the France background transparent and overlaying on Germany, that is freaky. The spike was the clue, a very distinctive feature. Do you think they go to the same tailor or data generator? That really is so bizarre, with several key features matching that I can spot already, that distinctive post-peak dip then spike. I'm really going to have to look at this more closely. Maybe those who said there is no virus were right. Probably not, but still. I do find that an unerringly good fit. You'll note I took care to align the dates and unity lines. We really are looking at all but identical charts. Well, that's for another time. Meantime, lockdown fail and back to Georgia. Your turn again. So Georgia, lots of mini outbreaks, sawtooth pattern, the sharp downline corresponding to a hump at the bottom, as it must. What do you make of it? See any lockdown divergence? So, 31st of March to 21st April, another country respecting the duration of the actual contagion, unlike us. A series of outbreaks, but they form a well-developed channel from before lockdown till well after. Lockdown fail. Greece, bear in mind you can always pause the video if you want to take the time to examine a particular image. Another mainstream EU country, but not an agenda follower by its results. Check our chart update videos. 23rd of March, that date again, to 3rd of May, again respecting their contagion and people. A couple of outbreaks en route, but overall a very well developed channel, consistent gradient and consistent with the green 0.985 world standard gradient. No hesitation here, no effect, lockdown fail. Guernsey, and as we crawl through these, I've double checked and it's 71 countries in total, not 90. The balance were in fact cities, my bad. Good news on the amount of work we'll have to do though, down somewhat. Talk about precipitate, they locked down and were barely registering our first growth rate point. The contagion is just getting started, the standard uptick, before it plummets in the outbreak proper. We've got zero information prior to lockdown, zero post this one outbreak of the virus. It was entirely run inside lockdown, so with nothing to compare it with, we're going to have to give it a no result. No doubt some troll will cite it as a case of a perfect lockdown. Oh well, they'll do what they do. Honduras. Honduras saw a normal series of outbreaks in a long, slow overall decline, consistent with these long, drawn-out and late contagions. Anything stand out as a sudden increased decline? Not really. Again, a hurried entry into lockdown, 20th of March, so there's not much prior, but prior to lockdown and post-incubation effective, we're seeing similar gradients, likewise in the other mini outbreaks. But like Guernsey, it actually goes into lockdown at the start of an outbreak, the uptick, and then when the cases begin proper, we get the classic hump and downline. Totally normal, but other than the matching prior, we don't have a single trajectory. A pain, but no result. It's worth noting that with that lovely long and well-defined downline from 28th March to 11th April, had they waited a week, we'd have had a perfect before or after. But they didn't, so we have to respect that. Pity. Hungary and some well-developed lines perfectly in line with world standard, 0.985, green dashed. What a pain. Again, lockdown even as a mini outbreak is ending. Seeds the next and downline starts basically as the lockdown becomes effective. So no before and after on the same downline. We have a series of outbreaks, downlines before and after that are consistent in gradient, indicating the same mechanics. I see only normal, but without the before and after in one downline, I'm going to have to mark it no result. India and very late to the experience. Any sudden increases in a pre-existing downline, steeper still as a lockdown bites and case growth falls off even more sharply? I'm not seeing any. Let's check lockdown, 25th March, go figure, such a popular time around the 23rd. Was groaning as they started lockdown again on nothing, what is it with the governments of the world, as if we didn't know, and looked to be effective from peak growth rate, but the purple just gets started down. Gotcha. So we get a perfectly normal downline, trend consistent with the 0.985 standard around the world, and a similar outbreak with matching downline before lockdown. With Hungary, I was reluctant to call it a fail on a matching prior downline only. We are supposed to be looking for divergence after all, but here it's perfectly reasonable and strong support for the growth decline that does initiate prior to the effective line. If this was the only country in the world, I might not want to base my entire thesis on it, but as yet another country that proceeds normally, no problem. No effect, lockdown fail. Iran. Bit of a messy slide, but strong and early growth data. That bright magenta was available to Ferguson, compelling evidence that the virus was not exponential, as if any virus was. A first in history? No. So we've got a good line. Can we use it? 14th March to 20th April, at least it was a tight bound. They've got 4 outbreaks contributing to the first peak at 3rd April or so, a week earlier than us, UK. The last is the main 3rd April peak. Then the surge between orange and blue, then short of orange, and last a blip. 2 before lockdown, one as lockdown commences, but ineffective, incubation lag, 1 post-effective, all with similar gradients consistent with the green dotted 0.985. Popular world standard, its off-lockdown peak is no worse than its lockdown peak, but not material. Again, a pity that the sequence of short outbreaks means we don't have one big line to compare, but a series of contagions all with the same characteristic gradient. I see no reason to distinguish them, no effect, lockdown fail. Like I said, Had you had to choose the lockdown date based on this chart and looking for a significant divergence from normal, would you have found one? Looks normal to me. Pity about the second major outbreak. Please, no second wave. But it is what it is. Iraq, it was doing well in the early days. Pity it got hit in a late contagion. Still, that's not why we're here. Spot the divergence? Yep, me neither. A nicely centered lockdown, good growth decline channel, consistent through the lockdown and lockdown effective. A couple of mini outbreaks at the beginning, but a clearly consistent trajectory. No effect, lockdown fail. Ireland. Any guesses as to when they locked down? Any clear divergence from the trajectory? Nice channel, consistent gradients, couple of mini outbreaks en route, but one long channel at the same gradient. No effect, lockdown fail. Sideways at peak looks a little dodgy, but not excessively fat, so we won't hold that against it. Italy, the first European, certainly the first to take a big hit. This is going to be fun. Spot any divergence in that pretty much ruler straight growth decline line, and that magenta says that the growth decline was visible to Ferguson, giving him no excuse, or anyone else, for exponential. Do I even need to draw a channel? It's so tight and straight, it's textbook. No divergence, no effect, lockdown fail. Now I notice that kink again spiked to 0, so let's just compare with the France transparency. Spikes in the wrong place, but interesting fat tail. Might just put that on the back burner along with the France-Germany check. Jordan. So any thoughts, candidates via divergence downwards? Let's take a peek. Not as conveniently perfect as Ireland, but a massive drop just prior to lockdown. Micro outbreak immediately into a ruler straight segment before lockdown can have any effect, and post incubation the outbreak is post peak and growth decline is rising the wrong way. We won't hold the rising growth decline against them, it has to recover to unity as the outbreak finishes. But a strong drop before lockdown, ruler straight decline before effective, recovering higher. Not really an effect, is it? Lockdown fail. Kosovo. Any thoughts when they might have entered lockdown? That there's no obvious indicator for this massively damaging event is significant in its own right. Huge impact on life, no obvious indicator on the chart. Enough said. Wow, not in a hurry, were they? Afraid of the bogeyman or what? With no before, kind of difficult to do a proper analysis. However, we can observe that the pre-effective gradient and several further outbreaks were all consistent. They're also consistent with the standard 0.985 decline factor that's so popular, green dotted. And of course the early bird gets the massive relatively outbreak later. So looks perfectly normal, massive outbreak, but no prior, so no result. Q8. Any guesses as to when they locked down? Kind of tough when the divergence we're looking for is entirely missing. 3 early outbreaks, 25th Feb, 14th March, 4th April downlines, but divergence non-visible. Lest anyone think that it's unfair to look for divergence, here's the same chart in principle for UK GDP with new GDP per year, equivalent cases, and GDP growth rate, growth factor. Here's what a 25% hit in GDP looks like. It's pretty damned visible. Here's a chart illustrating what a 6.9% hit looks like. Another figure we've seen, and it was mandated overnight on government Ferguson say-so. Shut down your life, your livelihood. So yes, divergence should be pretty damned visible. So any guesses as to where it is or isn't? Don't worry, I'm not seeing anything but normal either. 3 clear outbreaks to the 11th of April, 3 peaks which were surpassed with further cases and a relatively massive late outbreak. I have to look up when they entered lockdown, and that should tell you something, because it's certainly not obvious from the chart. 14th March to 29th March, which will end the in-lockdown cases 5th of April. Seeing the devastating hit on GDP on a whim makes me want to condemn this out of hand, but we'll do it right. No change over lockdown, outbreak over before effective. But we've got a second outbreak downline just in the lockdown effective, no change. No effect, lockdown fail. Lebanon. This really is an exercise in futility, but it's a critical exercise because the futility we're demonstrating is that of lockdown. So any guesses? Lots of outbreaks, several well developed with the world standard 0.985 gradient. 15th March to 28th March, similar to Q8, so out of lockdown, incubation 4th of April. A whole series of contagions with similar gradients, a couple of steeper spikes in May, but pre-post 22nd March, no change, versus out, e.g. 11th, 25th April, no change, fail. Libya. Any guesses? Kind of tough when it looks so familiar and normal. Well, let me look it up and get back to you. And it's another what the, because before there's even a detectable growth rate or visible cases, 22nd of March onwards, did they get the Ferguson memo? 3 steep mini outbreaks, and it didn't stop a normal gradient outbreak, 6th of June. We've got a pre-post effective and an apparently unhindered relatively massive outbreak, but they got in so early there's really nothing much to say. No result. Lithuania and a nice long straightforward growth decline line, so let's hope we get a lockdown date that's in there. Certainly no evidence of that to the naked eye, is there? No divergence, sudden drop compared to GDP. Hey ho, let's go look it up. And thank you, 16th March to 18th June, so we just get a full pre-lockdown, mid-post-lockdown pre-effective and post-effective record, with a well-established channel right the way through. No effect, lockdown fail. Malaysia. Some very early cases in January and February, a couple of sharp outbreaks in March. Let's see. 18th March to 9th June, we've got a couple of sharp outbreaks, then it settles down to a narrow and gentle decline, which means more cases relatively, and prior cases consistent with the autofit, so support the same gradient prior, mid and post. Lockdown fail. Mexico, this is going to be fun. Is it even worth asking if you can see a divergence, spike downwards? Gee, maybe the end one, likely an artifact of running out of data, or shall we just mark it fail? So, any thoughts? 23rd of March, should rename it Ferguson Day to 1st of June. Bit of an easy one long initial channel, one long-term channel, massive relative outbreak, no effect, fail. Mongolia, choppy data could be a struggle, lots of mini outbreaks. That alone should tell us something. Mini outbreaks mean the thing dies of its own accord, and fast. Even though reading the outbreaks is a challenge given there are so many of them, let alone spotting a divergence down in growth, fewer cases, still, here goes. And we get lucky. 10th of March to 16th of March, wow, shortest on record, but it becomes effective halfway through a strong decline, already established, but a couple of days post-lockdown. No real prior, pity, no result. Morocco, nice well-defined initial downline, will we get lucky? So any guesses? Let's see. One of the easiest as it turns out, 19th March to 10th of June. Well-established channel, no change, no effect, lockdown fail. Namibia, not much to go on here. Oh well, here goes. Actually close, as we've got enough for a result, but I wouldn't want this to be the only chart in the world. There are far better EU worst offenders, ironically, but yes, established down before lockdown, continues down, shallower worse, but in line with trend and 0.985. So with a pre, mid and post, a trend in line with the world 0.985, it may be tight, but it's a perfectly legitimate result. No effect, fail. Just a couple more, maybe 3 for this video, and that will leave one more similar video to complete the wiki list. Someone noted that Canada wasn't on the list, so the work won't have ended. Oh well. Likewise, the US will have been done by state, I suspect, so will need special attention. New York naturally will be most entertaining. For now, Nepal. Hey ho, looks pretty normal, but whether we get a decent test out of it? Too keen, lockdown on 24th March. Did they read the news and decide? Out on 14th June. Actually, we may have something there. They exit lockdown in mid-ascent, appropriate for a reputedly rather high place, are free at risk just before peak, and there's a long, well-established growth decline line even back to 11th April, and they quit lockdown and nothing happens. Perfect! I haven't really paid attention to exit effect or to deaths histories, doubling or trebling the length of these videos, no thanks, probably from both of us, but this is such an established and orderly trend that I like it. No effect, lockdown fail. New Zealand, which we've already done as a special, target New Zealand, but we'll do it here for completeness. With that long, well-defined slide, this is going to be a doozy if they were kind enough to give us a lockdown in the middle of it. And very kindly they do. One of the best charts. So I think we'll just do this, and it'll be an excellent one to finish up on for this video. Damn smack in the middle, extending significantly out either side, getting worse, less decline, not better, no effect, lockdown fail. It really is textbook, one of those I'd select for a key report. Thank you, New Zealand. Sorry to hear about the lost democracy. Maybe they'll give it back, or maybe they won't. Same over here. Well, that's our second batch. I'll put the 2 sets full screen for a second. That's 45 we've tested, 44 here, and the UK has long been known as fail, one of our earliest studies. Total results so far, 34 plus 1, 35 fails, and 10 no result. Yep, lockdown sure worked a treat to deceive and control us. One more video should allow us to complete the wiki list. Looks like the US-Canada might need a little special attention after that, but I think the message is pretty clear. In no image has lockdown changed the trajectory, steepening it for accelerated reduction in cases, because the growth rate is always declining anyway. In 35 out of 45, I feel comfortable saying that the chart shows a well-defined channel with lockdown having no effect. In some of those charts, the channel is so well defined and the lack of effect so pronounced, they're nearly art forms. Hell, to us, they should be art forms. They're beautiful. That's it for now. I'm Andrew Mather, a 60-year-old Brit, mathematician, financier, technologist, husband, biker, pilot, healer, whatever. Feel free to get in touch, andrew@peerlessreads.com or andrew@amather.com. Either should get to me.